are gathered for a celebration, not so much a solemn time, although it's certainly permissible to cry. And we're prepared if you need to do that. But we do, and Claire's wishes are that this be a celebration and a joyful time to celebrate Kurt's life and his impact on all of us who knew him and loved him and were privileged to be around him, whether that's hunting or in other capacities. So just a couple things. First of all, again, if you want to get food or drink, feel free to move about. You don't have to stay seated. Restrooms are located down that way if you need those. I'm going to ask if you'll put your cell phones on vibrate so that we don't interrupt our sacred time together with the ringing of phones. And I want to ask or share with you some words from Claire. She wishes to thank all of you for coming here today to celebrate the life of Kurt Krucke. Claire and Kurt's family appreciate the tremendous outpouring of love and support they have received. It has meant a great deal to all of them. Today is a celebration of Kurt's life. We look forward to stories being told about Kurt and his antics over the years as we gather here today. So tell away. The microphone is wireless, so you can move around while you tell your story as you want to. And you don't have to come up to the podium. I can bring the microphone to you, and you can share your story from wherever you are in the room today. And as a reminder of those masks that are on the front table, we want you to use those on the registration table. There's also a beautiful commemorative bookmarker. If you haven't picked up one of those, it's on the registration table. It's got beautiful pictures of Kurt and the story of his life. And it's in honor of Kurt's true love for reading books throughout his entire life. So it's a bookmarker kind of commemorative piece. And so you're encouraged to pick that up today. I do want to offer up just a brief word of prayer. I'm going to read a couple things that Claire wishes to be read. And then from there, it's a very informal time for you to share stories. And then as we come to the close of that time, however that flows, then Chad will be coming up and sharing some important pieces for us as we close our formal time. So I want to share a poem that kind of reminds us of what it's like to celebrate a life. And before I do that, if I'll just offer up a little prayer. God of creation, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for the gift of Kurt in his life. He was a part of your beautiful creation, and he loved all creatures, especially horse and hound and fox. We are grateful for his impact upon all of us and those who are not able to be here today. We're reminded of the words of Jesus, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And we pray for your holy comfort to be upon all who loved him, and especially upon Claire. Bless our time today, that it might be a celebration of life, not just a mourning for death. And the acknowledgement, Lord, that life is a fragile, sacred gift, and that none of us can take any day for granted or any person for granted. So help us to live well as Kurt did. We ask this in your holy name. Amen. So this poem is called Epitaph, and it's written by a poet called Merritt Malloy. I've seen two different versions of it, and one version closes with these words, I'll see you at home in the earth, and I think that fits Kurt, so I'm reading that version today. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not on your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away, and I'll see you at home in the earth. And a lot of times when someone dies, people will ask me as a pastor questions about heaven and hell. Sometimes they'll want to know, what is heaven like? And I'll say, came back and told me about it. They'll ask me maybe whether their loved one went to heaven. So I want to share a story. It doesn't come from Scripture. It actually comes from a book called Gone Away that you might be familiar with. It's an American classic about fox hunting. And I read this as a sort of a humorous story, and then I want to share a scripture afterwards that relates to this topic of heaven or hell. So this is the epilogue of the book. Then, after many blunders and years, you stand penitent, hat in hand at the judgment seat. And the judge says, does this mean that after a half century of trying, you couldn't even develop a pack of good hounds? You will perhaps defend yourself and explain that in your youth you read this book and it was wrong and threw you off the right line. Then St. Peter will probably say, let the punishment fall instead upon the author of this book. The recording angel will doubtless take his quill pen from behind his ear, lean forward, and in a whisper reminds St. Peter of the new regulations. Paragraph 47256, rule number 3. All fox hunters go straight to hell. For they have already had their heaven on earth. I say that humorously, but I also wish to just share something simple that makes sense to me. To me, God is love. And in 1 John 4, it says, God is love. No one has ever seen God, but when we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us. And so the question is, did you love Kurt?
Yes.
Yes. And if you loved Kurt, how could God's love be any less? So I'm comforted by those words and confident that even though this book says he went to hell, I truly think he's in the embrace of a loving God because he was so much a part of God's beautiful creation. And he loved the Creator and the Creator loved him. So those are just some words to share today that come from Claire and come from these gifts of this book and this poem. And now we want to just let you share stories or words or comments about Kurt and the meaning of your relationship and fun that you had with him hunting. And so the microphone will just be passed. You don't have to come up front. And I just welcome you to do that at this time. And just kind of raise your hand, we'll bring you the mic, and it'll go from there.
I lived with Camden for, 15 plus years, but Kurt was my first huntsman. And I don't know, there's a lot to say about Kurt. I have a couple stories, not to take up too much time. Claire said no sad stories, no tears, and it made me think about when I very first started hunting with Kurt. And I looked at him and I said, Kurt, I'm a crier. So if you yell at me, I'm going to cry. And so Kurt turned around and looked at me and he rubbed his hands together and he said, I love to make women cry. but he never did. To his credit, he never did make me cry. But he did a lot of wonderful things, and I have in my pocket a buckeye. And I know there's a lot of people in this room that probably have a buckeye from Kurt. Stop it. He gave them to us for good luck, and it has to be lucky because it has not gone to the dry cleaner in 12 years. Kurt was great, and he was always good to all of us, to everybody. I don't know anybody Kurt wasn't good to. There was a couple stories about him being called the professor, but I think the gang that was involved in that should tell that story. He had another nickname, and I believe John Rothell, as a youngster, laid it on him. Walking past Kurt in the Everyday Gourmet, he looked at him and he came back and he said, I know you. You're the boss of the dogs. So we would call Kurt either the professor or the boss of the dogs, and that was pretty fitting for Kurt. A memory I do have of Kurt every day. We were tacking up to go hunting, and as he went to pull up his girth, he reached under his horse's belly, and he jerked his hand back and held it up and had a sand spur. And he said, "That is why you always do that before you pull the girth up." And to this day, before I do that, and I go, "Thanks, Kurt," because I know he's saving me from getting bucked off. And my last story about Kurt was Dan was there for it, and Karen Sheely, Babo, maybe Melissa was there, I'm not sure. We were staff hunting, and he put in at a certain place, Lost Hound Swamp, and the hound struck pretty much immediately and got a gray out and ran it all the way to Arch Kingsley's, which for people who aren't familiar is almost from our eastern perimeter to our western. And we were hauling it. And Kurt got there, and the hounds put the fox into a woodpile behind Arch Kingsley's, and he let them bay and scratch and carry on for a few minutes, and then he called them off, and he said, "Enough, come on." And he had all his whips around the woodpile, and then he led the hounds away, and he looked at us and he said, "Don't let that fox, watch it, don't bolt out of there." And of course we're all going, "How would that fox do that? That's stupid." But he got a good distance away, and boom, out came the fox. And unfortunately, the hounds saw it, and they took off, and they dispatched it pretty quickly, and it was dead quiet. Everybody was horrified, but it got just, you could hear a pin drop, and the hound that got it was Gamble, who was a big dog hound. He got that fox, and he picked it up by the scruff of the neck, and he turned around and he looked at Kurt, and all the other hounds, I'm going to start talking. All the other hounds got in behind him, and he took that fox right to Kurt, and he presented it to him. Wow. And it was the most amazing animal performance I've ever seen, because like all the other hounds said, "It's your prize, take it to him." And he did. And Kurt got off his horse, and he patted it, and he patted every single hound. It was the most amazing boss of the dogs moment. Never seen anything like that. Somebody else take the mic.
I've ridden with Sandy for many years. I had the privilege to be a whipper-in with Camden Hunt since 1978, and I was a whipper-in with Kurt the entire time he was in Camden when he came to Camden. And when he came to Camden, he inherited a pack of hounds that were totally confused. We had an English huntsman who was very abusive. That huntsman was terminated, and Kurt came into a big fat mess. But he was patient, he worked hard, he had fantastic rapport with hounds. Soon, all of the hounds became his friends. He helped us improve our pack, and I can thank people like Ben Hardaway, Jeannie, and George Thomas, who gave us many good hounds. And soon we were able to go to hound shows and start winning championships. And that was all due to Kurt's hard work. The fun thing about Kurt that I always want to share and never forget is that he loved to take, hound walking was a chore, but it became a fun chore with Kurt. We would leave the draw yard, we'd walk out to the railroad tracks, we would walk over a mile down the tracks, looking around, being careful. Everybody just stayed with us, everybody stayed with the group. He'd take them up over a hill, and he'd take them to a big reservoir, and he'd stand with his biscuit bag and throw biscuits out in the water. He'd come back to us, he'd hand one of us the biscuit bag, he'd take off his shirt, and in he'd go. In he'd go with all the hounds, and he'd pick up those biscuits lying on top of the water and throw them to the hounds. And he'd get back out, come to us, put on his shirt, grab his biscuit bag, back to kennel. And I asked him one day, I said, "Kurt, how are your feet standing?" Here I had foot supports, heavy boot shoes. Kurt just had on simple tennis shoes. He was tough enough. He said, "Oh, I guess I'm just in good shape." That's the way I'm going to remember Kurt, throwing those biscuits. swimming. Thanks for the memories, Kurt.
My name is Terry Holmberg, and I was joint master of the Tri Hounds many years that Kurt came up and hunted with us. And one winter he came up in January, and we had our country split by what's called the Packlet River, which is a deep river, and this is a January morning, probably about 24 degrees. And of course the hounds cross over to the Fairview side of the country. And Kurt went into the water and came upside down. And his stirrups came out, and Kurt came out wet and cold, never complained, got on his horse and hunted the rest of the day. Without stirrups. And those stirrups, this was probably about 1992, the stirrups were found last year. Someone was walking through the Packlet River and they came through. Another time, we came down for a joint meet with Camden, brought our hounds down too. And we're going along where there's a train track. And the Tri Hounds, we had a split pack. So our pack is going one direction, Camden Hounds is going another. And I said, Kurt, when does the train come through here? He said, Terry, never have we ever had it happen. So the train is coming right down, and we have half our pack on one side of the road, and we're trying to get all of our hounds across, which we did in the nick of time, but I thought that was rather comical. We had a huntsman that in the centennial year of 2006 broke his both arms, and we needed help, and I called Kurt, and he was with Flat Branch then, and brought the Flat Branch hounds up. And I said, Kurt, we really need your help. We've got to keep our hunt going. And he said, look, we'll salt in your best hounds and we'll go have a day. Well, needless to say, we had a fabulous day. And everyone was just taken aback by his gentility and kindness. And Claire, of course, whipped in with him. And everyone would ask, when is Kurt and Claire coming back? So we had that all the time. So we ended up going down to Flat Branch quite a bit. But one thing happened one day. He had a pair of Centennial Award-winning hounds. One of them, his name was Finery. It was a Harlequin hound. I don't know if anybody knows Finery. Claire does. So we had someone from our hunt had kicked Finery right in the middle. And this was Mr. Cato's finest hounds. And I was so upset. Kurt was so gentle and kind. He didn't make the man feel foolish, which I did. But I think that's what I'm relaying here is the humanity of the man and how kind he was. And he, you know, we had some young, arrogant huntsmen from time to time, and I won't name any names, but Kurt put up with it. And he would always never make them feel less than. He would always treat the young huntsmen like anyone else, and you know, they had big egos, imagine that, right? And he just took it so well. And I was in awe of his gentility. So just a kind, loving man, and I just so gifted to be able to have the time that I had with him. And I love him very much. And thank you.
Let me tell you about the time it wasn't kind. I met Kurt in 1985 at Nantahala Outdoor Center. He had a Grateful Dead t-shirt on. I was meeting all the clinics, and we got along fine. Went to many Dead shows and all kinds of adventures, to say the least. But we were on Morris Island one night, and we hiked 4 miles all the way over to Fort Sumter. And he pulled out his famous silver whiskey flask, and we drank a good bit of that. And then he had forgotten that I had it, and we were about a mile back towards the lighthouse, and he got quite upset that he couldn't find the flask and that we had to go back and get it. And I'm like, I didn't say anything, and then finally figured out I had it. And if you guys haven't figured out yet that I'm about 5'4", and Kurt's about 6'3" or something, and anyway, it's a good thing I was trained by Dan Gable, the Olympian in wrestling. Anyway, Kurt was going to get that class back. And I was going to make him struggle to get it. And I was a really good wrestler. But anyway, I just about had him picked up. You know, he weighed 60 pounds more than I did, but I just about had him. And my right knee gave out. And he landed on top of me, and he still wanted the flask. And he had no sympathy for my right knee. And I couldn't, he was on top of my hands, I couldn't get to the flask. I'm like, give me the flask, get off of me, give me the flask, get off. Anyway, I finally got to the flask and handed it to him. And then we walked back, with 3 more miles and about a mile left. He finally figured out he was going to have to pick me up and carry me. But I got so many memories of that man. I miss him so much, but man, thank God I had him. And we had him.
Okay, so I have one me story, just Krucke and I, and then one about the professor that Sandy alluded to. So the story about Kurt and I was, it was coving starts, you know, in October. A lot of times Halloween comes up pretty quickly, and we always dressed up for Halloween. And I happened to be helping make Kurt's next hunt horse for the following season, so I was riding right behind him as we were starting out our season. And I decided for Halloween, if I'm going to ride right behind him, I should dress as him. So I put on a good tie-dye shirt and a really ratty pair of suede chaps. And my hair was a little bit longer, so I just let it run out the back of my helmet. And I drew on a little beard and had a grand time with it. And it was all wonderful until we left the kennels and we went to cross the railroad tracks. And my horse stepped on one of the railroad spikes and hung the edge of his shoe. And so, this is scary. Anybody that rides here knows, like, you don't want to get stuck on the tracks. So I said, Kurt, wait, hold on. Hey, we're stuck on the tracks. And I jumped off, and the horse was very well behaved. You know, I managed to wiggle his foot off of it. Nothing happened. Crossed over the tracks, got back on. I was kind of shaking a little bit like no speaking. And he turned around and he looked at me and he said, well, you can dress like me, but I can ride better than that. What I appreciated was how he just stayed calm. He just stayed calm. You know, I was, oh my God, the horse is stuck on the tracks. And he just made light of it. And every town stood there and waited while he thought up his little joke to get me with. Yeah. So the professor, why we call Kurt the professor. So everybody knows that Kurt loved fall, because it stopped being so hot here. Hunting started, oyster roast season came around, and Camden has the Blues Festival. And Kurt made sure that he did not miss one single night of the Blues Festival. He would actually move down from Liberty Hill when he lived up there, and move into town to Caroline's house or somebody's house, drag Claire down here because he was the Blues Festival took priority. So a lot of us girls that whipped into him, we had girls' night at the Blues Festival, and of course, Kurt and Claire were there, and they met up with us, and we were kind of playing that. And Claire got tired and said, I'm going home, and you know, we all stayed out a bit, and we ended up dancing at one of the local bars. And Kurt got in the middle of all of us, and there's 5 of us girls or so, a bunch. And anybody that's seen Kurt dance knows that he does it with his whole soul. And when it's blues music, it's even better. Yeah. And so you just watch it. So we ended up kind of in a circle around it, and we're all laughing and watching it. And then he needs another beer. And so he goes to the bar to get an IPA, and this guy at the bar goes, so, what are you a professor? And Kurt said, oh yeah, I taught him everything they know.
A lot of stories that I can share about Kurt, but probably one of my favorite was when we were learning how to whip in. He did a great job rotating us, so we would all ride with different whips and different positions, and we would also get to ride behind him, and that way we kind of saw how the whole thing went down. So it was my day to ride with him, and we were having a joint meet with Whiskey Road, and I got to ride right behind him, and we were going around Condon Swamp, and then we were on a coyote, and we were kind of coming around the swamp really, really fast at a gallop, and the coyote ran out right underneath his horse's neck. He never saw it because it was so, like, right in front of him, we were going so fast. Well, his horse moves, slams on the brakes, and he goes over the shoulder, and he's laying on the ground, and First Field comes up behind, and he's mad, and he's embarrassed, and he just looked back at them, and he said, I am just down here checking out the scent and seeing what's
Thank you. My name is Linda McLean. I'm one of the masters of the Aiken Hounds in Aiken. And I was very, very fond of Kurt. I have one very funny story to tell you, and then one that's really more heartfelt about Kurt's kindness. Anyway, I think it was maybe the first time that Kurt hunted the hounds for Edgar Cato at Augusta Plantations some years ago. And Edgar invited me to ride up with him, which was great. So there was Kurt in front of us with the hounds. We were headed for the first draw. And Edgar leans over on his horse and he says, do you think I should do something about that ponytail? I said, I don't know, Edgar. That's pretty personal. But anyway, as it happened, we had a whale of a day. One of the best days we ever had out there. And Edgar came to me when we were having our tailgate afterwards. He said, I guess I'm not going to speak to him about that ponytail. Anyway, the other story is more personal, and it was actually some time before that. I was hunting the hounds for Aiken, and we went down to Middleton to have a joint meet with them. Jamie Green was hunting the hounds at that time for Middleton, so I think that was well after Kurt had been hunting the hounds there, but he was there. And we had a wonderful joint meet in Middleton. There was a wonderful meet place there right in front of the wonderful old house, and it was very, very special. We had a great time. At the end of the day, we were out one hound, one of mine, a hound called Natalie, who was by a really wonderful hound, my hound of a lifetime, whose name was Nate, who was the top drag hound during the MFHA Centennial and very, very dear to me. Anyway, it was his daughter Natalie that was missing. And she had a tracking collar on, of course, and at the end of the day, when she wasn't there, Kurt said to me, he said, let's go take a look. So he had this big fat antenna that he stuck on his truck, and away we went. And of course, he knew Middleton very, very well. We went all over the property, the perimeter of the property. No Natalie, no Natalie. And I was upset. It was a couple of hours later, it was getting dark. And Kurt said, you know what, I'm going to stay overnight. Can you meet me here tomorrow? So I did. I stayed a short ways away from there, and I met Kurt first thing the next morning. And away we went, driving around again with this big antenna. And we were, if you're familiar with Charleston, it was between Highway 17 and Middleton, roughly. And there's some rather new housing developments there. And we were wandering around. Kurt suddenly said, I think I hear it. And we stopped and we proceeded slowly, and the signal was getting stronger by the moment. And we drove into this housing development down at the end of the road at a cul-de-sac. There's a swamp in the back, and we were sitting so near it. He said, no, go down there. She doesn't know me. You call her with your voice. I'll stay up here. I'm going to watch her and listen for her. He said, you go down there and you call her. And I went down and I called, and all of a sudden she appeared out of the swamp. She was a hair's breadth from Highway 17, which tells you the amount of distance she traveled from Middleton. And frankly, she was, as the crow flies, not far from where I was staying the night before. It was just, but I get teary thinking about it. Yes, because it was a wonderful hound, I was really blessed to have her back, but more because Kurt's kindness toward me. He didn't have any dog in the fight. He just was that level of caring to have taken the time and the dedication to cruise around his truck with me until we found a hound that meant a lot to me. I miss him very much.
without a horsepower. With Captain Southern, we called my group, whether we were in camping in March, he would be in the water. I take him to the beach, he's in the water. Whenever it is, he's in the water. And we stand there for hours. Those of you who have with Kurt know that he'll say, oh, there's no rules for Kurt, but you know he has things that he thinks you should do. So I have a list of them. First thing is, you'll keep doing this until you get it right. If you're going for a hike for a day, be prepared for the whole day. If you're going for a day, be prepared for overnight. If you're going overnight, you need to be prepared for being an extra day. These are things that you won't learn from traditional stories. When the night comes, you should have 3 sources of light. If you have beer, of course you have beer. It goes in the koozie. If it's the cold one, it goes in the koozie. If you're looking for something, look in all your pockets. All your pockets. And if it's in the back, it's probably in the bottom of the back. Whenever we're getting close to the end of the trip, look out. Here comes the dangerous part. And remember, it's dangerous out there. It's probably the longest.
My name is Carl McMillan. I had hunted with Kurt quite a bit, but our story goes back a lot further than fox hunting. We both grew up in Somerville, South Carolina, and Kurt was 4 years older than me, so he was ancient, right? but he had, by the time we met, he had moved from the gatekeeper at Middleton to running the stable yard. So I had a summer job. I broke the first team to drive the carriages and the coaches because they'd only had the mule wagons up to that point. So I had a great summer driving, figured out how to get all the tourists from the parking lot, pockets full of tips. It was a wonderful summer. So I go back to school and Kurt decides he's gonna, well, to shorten this up a little bit, back it up a little bit. When I went to the stable yard, of course, there was candle making and weaving and blacksmithing, and we had the little shirts with the bell sleeves we were supposed to wear, and we were all supposed to know how to do all these things. Well, after the first weekend, he said, Carl, I don't want you anywhere but the barn. I had already spilled the wax, I had smashed my finger, everything was wrong. So you stay with the horses and the mules. I don't want you anywhere else in the city. I'm fine with that. So I go back to school. We're hunting next door at Middleton, and I drive in one day, and the little gatehouse is gone. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? So, and he was, I think, laying the drag at the time for us hunting. I said, what happened? He said, well, those team that you trained decided they were going to go one on one side and one on the other of the guardhouse while the guard was in it. And I said, no, no, no. I didn't say they were trained. I said they were started. Needless to say, there were no more teams hooked up after that. He had to do singles from there on. And then it was, I guess I hadn't seen Kurt in 20 years and ended up at Flatbats one day. And he wrote up, he says, is that one broke or finished? I said,
Story's done? Story's done, folks? I'm sure there's more, so if you think of it, yeah, get her the mic.
The only thing that I want to say is, find him in there.
Oh, yeah.
Find him in there.
Kurt and I used to walk the hounds up every evening. And when they got to be 4 or 5 months old, we'd get brave and we'd take them on horseback a couple of times. And Kurt had a really nice old horse sneak, and they could like play jump rope with his tail. And we would take my little spotted dog, Casper, who was a great squirrel hound with them all the time. And we decided we were going to take the horses this evening on out, and we were going to go over to the pistol range with them. We got across the railroad tracks, and we had 2 litters of puppies that year, which was unusual. We had 16 puppy teams, 8 couple plus Casper. And we got across the railroad tracks, and Casper lit off to the left, through the woods, with 16 foxhound puppies in tow. And there was a scuffle and a kerfuffle and lots of speaking and barking and then there was silence. And out came, Kurt blew the horn, blew the horn, blew the horn, and out came 16 puppies. And the biggest doghound puppy had a gray squirrel in his mouth. And, you know, we dealt with that and put the squirrel down. Went back to the kennels and put the puppies away and looked at each other and said, well, I guess that's the last time we'll go on horseback with these puppies. And the next day we had hound exercise on horseback. And we were gathered at the lower kennel yard gate getting ready to take the hounds out for exercise. And a lot of the staff was there. I know Dan was there, and I believe Sharon was there. Sandy may have been there. And Judy was there. Judy was still riding at the time. And Kurt said, the puppies had their first kill yesterday. And everybody went, yeah, it was a lovely short run on the gray.
And we bonded almost instantly with a large group of people there. And we were all in the 17 to 20-year-old age and fully committed to testing boundaries in many different disciplines. If you ever see the picture of the Brome with 2 guys on it, and Kurt in his styling corduroy suit and wool socks, that was my wedding. We had our reception there, and my wife and I, Nancy, who Kurt fully approved of, has been with me now for 40-some-odd years. But Kurt wasn't a horseman when I met him. He didn't have long hair. He looked more like a Labradoodle. Hey, Carl. You're here to Snopes me. So, you know, we lived our lives and things went off, and Kurt went to Clemson for a couple of years, and we did different things. And I dropped in on him one winter in Clemson unannounced, and he was miserable. And he came home, and I went down to Alabama for a little bit, moved back, and was looking for a place to live on Folly Beach, and suggested one day, why don't you just move out to Folly Beach with me? And without hesitation, he said, that sounds a great idea. And literally a week later, we were living on Folly Beach, and I think that's one of the events that was the pivotal point in his life that led to a horse life and not a life that was settling here. We had a good time out there. I'm not going to go into great details. There's going to tear that legend down. But I'm going to tell you one story that I think was that clinched I'm getting out of college and I'm not going to be an engineer. He was doing an internship. With the Corps of Engineers one summer. And he got invited to this social event at Murrells Inlet. They had done some dredging up there. The Corps liked to celebrate that. So they were going to have a big party up there, and I was Kurt's +1. We went up there and had too much beer, and not enough fish, and watched Strom Thurmond and other political notables, commend the Corps for completing this. And we were consuming, as we used to say, back in mass quantities, and rolled back on the bus. And I was working on the waterfront at the time, having pretty much given up on college. And we were having a conversation that might have been a good course for some years. And suddenly, above me appeared the countenance of a very large, angry woman. Wanted me to quiet down and watch my language, which was totally appropriate that she would calm me down, and I should have just shut up, but I didn't have the ability to. So she and I got into a little bit of a verbal kerfuffle and started threatening how they were going to all meet in the colonel's office the next morning. That's a big part of how Kurt got the nickname that we knew him by, the colonel. And also the repercussions and the general atmosphere of being called down for just having a really good time, I think made an impression on Kurt. Wasn't long after that he terminated his little foray at the College of Charleston, which I don't think was very sincere altogether, and started his career at Middleton Place as a state-of-the-art hand. We benefited greatly from George Middleton Place. We did things out there, the cable tosses, the terrace tumbles, all kinds of strange things. But he was on the path there. He started meeting the likes of Bill Green and learning horsemanship. He started learning about maintaining and stewardship for properties like that. And so that was me that let him see the light, gave him the impulsive nature to follow the road less traveled. And my anachronistic friend certainly did that. Hope y'all remember him the way you do. That's how I remember him.
My name is Andy Burrows. My husband has been Kurt's best friend for 40 years. He can talk today, and I'm going to have a hard time too, but I just wanted to talk because we love him, and he was always a good person and an animal lover. And I first met him at Middleton. I ran the stables there. I was the riding director, and he was our supervisor. And he was always very kind to me and helpful. And I had fox hunted before, but never done the drag hunt fox hunting. I grew up in New York and Virginia, and we did a totally different kind of hunting. But he taught me the ropes, and I learned so much from him. And as my husband grew to be best friends with him, they went in every body of water in South Carolina, in a kayak, in their bodies and canoes and everything. I didn't always keep up. I actually jumped in the water in a swamp, fully dressed, because I couldn't keep my balance in a canoe. And it was at that point that I realized I couldn't keep up with the boys. But we enjoyed him for years. We went down the Colorado River with him, all 212 miles. It was the best vacation I've ever had. And I just love him, and I need to tell everybody that my husband can't speak, and I'm not doing very well. But we love him and appreciate him, and he's just a wonderful person, and we're all going to miss him.
Kurt, I got to know him working with the Liberty Hill Civic Association. And anyway, I really thought what a neat guy he is, and we did some barbecues and different events and everything, and he was just the most wonderful person. Oh, well, what a neat guy. Well, fast forward about several years, and I'm taking a walk out in front of my home on Liberty Hill by the lake, and Lake Watery, and here comes somebody riding a bicycle. And he said, "Hey, good to see you." And I said, "Well, good to see you." And I wasn't even sure who it was, but I continued walking with my dog, and I ran into Kurt. And we just had the most wonderful conversation. I don't know how to explain it. He told me all about his life, how he got to Camden, that they were planning to, y'all were planning to go back to Aiken at some point. Just full of life and full of energy, and I thought, wow, what a neat guy. I'm so glad I finally got to have a conversation with him. And he was so happy and at peace, I thought, and just he loved nature, I think. And I know nothing about horses, so I can't relate to him in that regard, but I do have dogs. But anyway, I just wanted to say, I thought, what a wonderful person. And then a couple of weeks later, I saw the obituary, and I thought, I'm so glad I got to talk to him and meet him. So anyway, he's just great. Thank you.
I was just going to say a little story about Kurt. This January, we were road whipping, and I was going out with him, and I hadn't done this before, for real. And I was tracking the hounds on a night path, and we stopped. The hounds seemed to be separated into groups, and he looked out, got out of the car, turned to the ring, kind of just stood there and said, no, we're okay. He said, just don't look at that, just listen. And we stood there, and I could hear the hound, and it made no sense to me. And his head sort of turned, and he kind of looked up, and he seemed to sort of smile, and then he was a little bit, and he came back, and he was happy. And then I could tell that all of a sudden he was just really at peace. And he was listening, he said, did you hear that? It didn't make any sense to me. And then all of a sudden, I could tell that all of the speaking was the same. That they had come together and they were moving in the same direction. And he was just like, those are good hounds. And he just wanted to listen to the hounds. And that was a great memory. And it was an important thing. I'm really glad that I got the opportunity.
I'll say something if I don't have to come to the microphone. I've known Kurt since his days at Middleton. Always wonderful, wonderful person. But one thing I was thinking about, didn't prepare this at all, was many times back in the day, we had 50, 60, 70 people for lunch at the clubhouse. And we would watch them all leave, and they'd get in their trailers, and one, everybody would be gone. Kurt lived across the street. And invariably, people that I can point out that I'm not going to, they were sitting in chairs, and he said, this is a look who's left club. And we had many, many times after that, one of the fond memories of Kurt sitting there with the 8 that were left, members of the Look Who's Left Club.
Okay, Jane Kirby, go ahead and view hall, girl.
Come on, Jane. Come on. One more time,
Gotta
Jane.
do it. One time, Kurt.
One time for Kurt.
Come on, baby. Jane, come on. It's been a long time. You can never win.
He was a husband who came and took over Kurt's packing house in Camden when Kurt and I were dating. And Kurt and Chad spoke often. He complimented Kurt's packing house, and we appreciated him coming in to do this. Chad is going to take a minute to explain to you what blowing the ground means from a husband to do. that is an honor to a husband that's passed away. So I'm going to hand the mic to Chad and take it away.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Yeah, my name's Chad. And first of all, I wanted to say, raise a glass to Kurt. He was a great hound man, bred a great pack of hounds. He really did a great job, and Camden took over the biggest, baddest pack of hounds you've ever seen in the South when I came into this hunt, and I want to thank Kurt for that. He always treated me like a gentleman. And those of you who don't know, this was Kurt. This is the way Kurt dressed on an average fox hunting day, all the non-fox hunting people. So this is a traditional fox hunting kit. I didn't wear this just for my own humor. But yeah, this is how Kurt would dress on an average hunt day. So let me just show you this. I'm Kurt on a work day. And then George Thomas, you stand up, put your hat on, George. This is Kurt on a non-hunting day. What I'm about to do is a timeless tradition that goes back ages and ages, and it's a brotherhood against not just other huntsmen but other fox hunters in general. And what it is what we do with the horn here is it's virtually our weapon as a huntsman. We don't use any kind of guns or bow and arrows or anything like that. So the horn is our virtually our weapon in fox hunting, and it's a tradition for another huntsman to blow "Gone Away" when another huntsman passes away. And "Gone Away," if you don't know, it's not to be mournful or anything like that. When you blow this call, it's meant to, honor, to kind of get the hounds hyped up, to get the field ready to tighten, to put those heels down and get ready to run, because the fox has been sighted. And here we go, we're fixing to roar through the woods. And what I want you to kind of envision when I do this is not Kurt in a sad way, but Kurt as, hiking up that Appalachian Trail in the sky. Or swimming in the pond.
Let's give a cheer. If you're empty-handed, raise your hand. We all love them. And so, please, everybody, just enjoy the rest of the time here. Talk among yourselves, tell stories. Of course, the food and the bar and drinks will be available for the rest of the time. Thank you.
Thank you.